The courtroom was silent, filled with the kind of tension that pressed on people's chests and made every breath feel heavier than it should. Rows of wooden benches were packed with reporters, curious citizens, and family members of both the accused and the supposed victims. Every eye in the room was fixed on the twin brothers standing at the defense table. Ethan and Daniel looked exactly alike, but anyone watching them long enough could see the small differences. Ethan stood straighter, his jaw set, his dark eyes, scanning the room calmly, almost too calmly. Daniel, on the other hand, shifted slightly, his fingers resting on the edge of the table as though testing the wood grain. They did not whisper to each other, nor did they show fear. Instead, they looked almost prepared. The air buzzed with suspicion. People whispered, "That's them, the masterminds. The evidence is solid." Others leaned forward, curious about how such young men could be accused of crimes so large in scale. The prosecutor had painted them as dangerous, clever, and heartless. And yet, as the twins stood there, their calm expressions didn't match the picture of villains most expected to see. Judge Harrison entered, his black robe flowing as he climbed to his seat at the bench. The sound of the gavel striking wood made several people jump. "Court is now in session," he said firmly, his voice carrying authority. Harrison was not a man who believed in hesitation. He had built his entire career on decisive rulings and harsh sentences. Many people respected him for it, though others feared him. To Harrison, criminals had no place for sympathy. The moment his sharp eyes landed on Ethan and Daniel, he felt a wave of certainty. These two are guilty. They think they're clever, but they won't outsmart me. Across the room, the prosecutor, Ms. Carver, rose to her feet. She was known for her relentless energy and sharp tongue. She adjusted her glasses and gave the jury a tight smile before beginning her opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she said, her voice confident, "what you see before you are not just two men. You see two minds that work together to commit some of the most elaborate crimes this city has faced. Fraud, conspiracy, and even lives disrupted because of their greed. The evidence will show that these twins thought they could hide behind their identical faces, but the truth has caught up to them." Gasps and murmurs spread through the gallery. Ethan kept his face still, while Daniel glanced at the jury for the briefest second, as if measuring their reactions. At the defense table, their lawyer, Mr. Walters, frowned. He was frustrated. His clients had insisted on saying almost nothing during their preparation. They refused to share personal details or even protest the charges strongly. Walters had done his best, but in his heart, he wondered, do they know something I don't? One by one, Ms. Carver presented pieces of evidence. Photographs of documents, grainy security footage, and a list of witnesses ready to testify. Each piece made the twins appear more guilty. The jury leaned forward, hanging on her every word. Still, the twins didn't flinch. Ethan's eyes drifted around the room, noticing details others ignored. The nervous twitch of a guard near the back, the way one reporter tapped notes in a rhythm, the slight flicker of the judge's eyebrow each time new evidence was revealed. Daniel mirrored Ethan's quiet observation, almost as if they were collecting information instead of defending themselves. For the audience, their silence was unsettling. A young woman whispered to her friend, "Why aren't they saying anything? Don't they care?" An older man in the back muttered, "Guilty as sin. Look at their smug faces." Judge Harrison listened with narrowed eyes. To him, their composure was arrogance. He believed he could see through people, and these twins were no different. They think they're in control. They think they'll walk away, he thought. As the morning dragged on, the atmosphere in the courtroom thickened. The tension wasn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about mystery. Who were these men, really? Why didn't they fight harder against the accusations? Even the jury felt a strange unease, though the evidence seemed clear. During a short break, Walters leaned close to the brothers. He lowered his voice and whispered, You need to help me here. If you stay this quiet, they'll bury you. Do. You understand? Life in prison is not something you just accept. Ethan finally turned his head slightly, his voice calm, almost too calm. We understand more than you think. Walters blinked. Then why aren't you saying anything? Daniel gave a faint smile, his first real expression of the day. Because sometimes silence is stronger than words. The lawyer leaned back, shaken. He had represented difficult clients before, but these two were different. It was as if they weren't even worried about the outcome of the trial. As if they already knew how the story would end. When court resumed, the jury was presented with more damning evidence. Witnesses swore they had seen the twins involved in shady dealings. Others claimed they had overheard conversations linking them to criminal leaders. Piece by piece, a puzzle was forming, one that pointed directly at Ethan and Daniel, and yet, through it all, the twins stood tall. They neither broke down nor shouted at the unfairness of it all. Their silence became the loudest sound in the courtroom, echoing louder than any testimony given against them. By the end of the day, the spectators, left buzzing with theories. Some believed the twins were guilty masterminds who had grown arrogant. Others felt there was something hidden, something just beneath the surface that nobody could explain. But Judge Harrison didn't believe in mysteries. To him, truth was simple. Evidence plus silence equaled guilt. And as he packed his notes for the night, he thought, tomorrow, I will make sure these two learn they are not above justice. What he didn't know was that Ethan and Daniel were not the ones on trial. The real trial hadn't even begun. Judge Harrison sat in his chambers early the next morning, sipping a strong cup of black coffee. His desk was neatly arranged, every paper stacked at perfect angles, every pen aligned. To those who knew him, this order reflected his mind, clear, firm, and unshakable. But as he reviewed the notes from the first day of the trial, a small frown lingered on his face. Something about the twins unsettled him. He had presided over hundreds of trials. He had seen criminals break down in tears, beg for forgiveness, or lash out in anger when faced with evidence. But Ethan and Daniel showed none of that. They were calm, still, and strangely patient. Harrison told himself it was arrogance. They think they're clever. They think they can outsmart the system. Still, he couldn't ignore the faint chill he felt whenever their eyes met his. It was as if they weren't afraid of him at all. The courtroom was even more crowded that morning. Word of the trial had spread, and now reporters filled the aisles, cameras flashing as the twins were escorted in. The audience murmured, whispering theories and predictions. Some believed the judge would deliver a quick sentence. Others hoped for some shocking twist. Ethan entered first, walking with steady steps. Daniel followed, his expression calm but unreadable. Together they moved like mirror images, almost perfectly in sync. Their composure only fueled the curiosity of everyone watching. Judge Harrison tapped his gavel. Court is in session. The prosecutor, Ms. Carver, wasted no time. She launched into her arguments with renewed energy, presenting the jury with another stack of documents. These papers, she said firmly, show clear proof of the twins' connection to fraudulent accounts. The money trail does not lie. She moved across the courtroom, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The defense may try to distract you with technicalities, but facts are facts. Numbers do not change. Actions leave traces, and these men left more than enough. The jury nodded, impressed by her confidence. Judge Harrison leaned back, satisfied. To him, Ms. Carver was doing exactly what needed to be done, but then his eyes drifted toward the twins. They weren't rattled. Ethan rested his hands on the table, fingers tapping slowly, rhythmically. Daniel leaned slightly forward, his gaze fixed on Ms. Carver, as though studying every word she spoke. The judge narrowed his eyes. Why aren't they nervous? They should be worried, unless they believe they've already won. During a break, Harrison stepped into the hallway. The building was buzzing with reporters rushing to send updates. He overheard one say, "They look too calm, almost like they're hiding something big." Another whispered, "Maybe they're working with someone powerful behind the scenes." Harrison dismissed the chatter. Speculation. That's all it is. I deal in evidence, not stories. But as he returned to the bench, his chest felt heavier. The trial continued with witness testimonies. A businessman took the stand, claiming he had seen the twins in a suspicious meeting. His words were shaky, but Ms. Carver guided him carefully, painting a clear picture of guilt. When it was time for cross-examination, Mr. Walters, the twins' lawyer, rose. His voice was calm but hesitant. "Sir, you say you saw my clients that night. How far away were you?" The man hesitated. "About 50 feet. And the lighting?" Walters pressed. "It was dim, but I'm sure it was them." Walters sighed softly. No further questions. The twins did not protest. They didn't lean over to whisper strategies or show frustration. They simply sat, silent and composed, as if the testimony meant nothing at all. Judge Harrison watched closely. Most defendants would have reacted, a sigh, a shake of the head, maybe even a whisper to their lawyer. But not these two. Their stillness was unnatural. As the afternoon stretched on, Harrison found his thoughts drifting. He recalled his years on the bench, the countless faces that had passed before him. Fear, anger, regret. He had seen it all, but never this. Ethan glanced at him just then, locking eyes for the briefest moment. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't fear. It was something far stranger, as though Ethan knew something the judge didn't, something bigger than the trial itself. The judge quickly looked away, annoyed by his own reaction. "They're just criminals playing mind games," he told himself. "And I won't fall for it." Later, as the courtroom emptied for the day, Judge Harrison lingered behind, staring at the empty defense table. The twins' quiet confidence replayed in his mind. Ms. Carver entered, gathering her files. "We've got this in the bag," she said cheerfully. "The jury is leaning our way. Tomorrow should lock it in." Harrison gave a small nod. "Yes, it looks that way." But his voice lacked conviction. She paused, noticing his tone. "Is something troubling you, Your Honor?" He straightened, hiding his doubt. "No. Just making sure every detail is in order. Justice must be exact." She smiled politely and left. Harrison remained, tapping his pen against the desk, his thoughts unsettled. Meanwhile, Ethan and Daniel sat together in the holding room. The air was cool, the walls bare. For the first time all day, Daniel spoke softly. "He's watching us more closely now." Ethan nodded. "Good. That means the message is working." Daniel leaned back, his lips curling into the faintest smile. "Do you think he suspects?" "No," Ethan replied firmly. "He sees only what we allow him to see." They exchanged a glance, silent communication passing between them. To the outside world, they were two accused men, facing the possibility of a lifetime behind bars. But to each other, they were something else entirely. Players in a game no one else knew was being played, and the judge, for all his experience, was about to become a key piece on their board. Judge Harrison returned home that evening, but peace did not follow him. As he sat at his desk, the faces of Ethan and Daniel haunted his mind. Their calm, their silence, their strange confidence, none of it fit the pattern he had trusted for decades. For the first time in years, the judge questioned his own certainty. And in that quiet doubt, a crack began to form in the wall of his confidence. What he didn't realize was that the twins had planned it that way all along. The third day of the trial began under a gray sky. Clouds hung low over the courthouse, as if nature itself sensed the weight of what was happening inside. By the time the judge entered and called the room to order, the gallery was already full. People leaned forward with anticipation. They knew this day would be different, the day the prosecutor revealed her strongest evidence. Ethan and Daniel sat quietly at the defense table, their hands folded neatly. Their lawyer, Mr. Walters, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. He had reviewed the files late into the night, but the weight of the case pressed harder with every passing hour. The evidence looked impossible to fight. Ms. Carver, the prosecutor, stood tall as she carried a stack of folders to the front. Her voice rang with confidence as she addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we will show you the heart of this case. The documents, the recordings, and the witnesses all tell the same story, a story of deception carefully crafted by the defendants." She opened the first folder and held up several papers. "These are bank records," she said, pacing slowly. "You can see here the transfers made from multiple accounts, different names, different signatures, but all leading back to these two men." The jury leaned in as the records were displayed on a projector screen. Numbers and dates flashed before them, building a picture of financial schemes too complex for ordinary people. "Notice the timing of the transfers," Carver continued. "Notice the patterns. No one could pull this off without careful planning. And who better than two men who share not just a face but a mind?" Gasps filled the room. Ethan and Daniel remained still. Ethan's eyes studied the screen as though memorizing every detail. Daniel leaned back slightly, his expression unreadable. Next came video footage. Grainy clips appeared on the screen. Shadowy figures entering buildings late at night. Briefcases exchanged. Quick conversations in dimly lit corners. "Security cameras don't lie," Carver declared. "And while the defense may claim these, images are unclear. The timing and context make the truth obvious." She paused dramatically. "You are watching the defendants in action," the audience murmured. The figures in the footage were blurry, but the resemblance to the twins was undeniable. Mr. Walters rose nervously. "Objection, Your Honor. The images are not clear enough to identify my clients with certainty." Judge Harrison looked over his glasses. "Objection noted. The jury will decide how much weight to give the evidence." Walters sank back into his seat, frustrated. He glanced at Ethan and Daniel, hoping for some reaction, some clue to guide his defense. But both men gave him nothing, only calm silence. Then came the witnesses. One after another, people took the stand. A former employee claimed he overheard conversations linking the twins to secret accounts. A shopkeeper swore he saw them near a suspicious meeting place. Even a neighbor testified, saying the twins often kept late hours and received unusual visitors. Each testimony built on the last, layer after layer, until the story of guilt seemed undeniable. The jury scribbled notes, their expressions tightening with every word. And yet, the twins did not falter. Ethan tapped his finger softly against the table, his rhythm steady. Daniel's eyes shifted from witness to witness, as though quietly measuring each person's honesty. To the jury, their silence seemed like arrogance. To the audience, it was proof of guilt. But to anyone watching closely, it was something else entirely. Patience. Judge Harrison observed it all carefully. The evidence was overwhelming. The documents, the videos, the testimonies, it all pointed to one conclusion. But the judge's unease grew stronger. He had seen guilty men before. They shouted, they wept, they bargained. But Ethan and Daniel did none of that. Their stillness was different, almost strategic. Harrison shook the thought away. "No, this is clear. The case is solid. The truth is in front of me." And yet, deep inside, the doubt refused to fade. During the lunch recess, the twins sat in the holding room again. Walters paced the small space, running a hand through his hair. "This is bad," he muttered. "The jury is swallowing everything. If you don't speak up, if you don't fight back, they'll lock you away forever." Ethan looked at him calmly. "You're doing fine." "Fine?" Walters snapped, lowering his voice when a guard glanced their way. "They've got documents, recordings, witnesses. I can't fight shadows, boys. If you want any chance, you need to tell me what's really going on." Daniel smiled faintly, leaning forward. "Sometimes the best move is to let the other side think they're winning." Walters stared at him, confused. "This isn't a game." Ethan's eyes darkened, slightly. "No, it's much bigger than that." Before Walters could press further, the guard called them back to the courtroom. The afternoon session was heavier than the morning. More evidence, more witnesses, more layers to the story. The jury's pens scratched furiously across their notepads. The prosecutor's voice grew stronger, her confidence swelling with every passing hour. By the time court adjourned, the case against Ethan and Daniel looked airtight. The audience left buzzing, reporters rushing to file stories with headlines, ready to declare the twins guilty before the verdict was even given. Judge Harrison returned to his chambers, rubbing his temples. Everything pointed one way, and yet he couldn't shake the image of their calm faces. Why weren't they fighting? Why did they sit there, almost inviting the weight of the evidence? He told himself he was overthinking it. Facts don't lie. Evidence is truth. Still, as he closed the case file for the night, a quiet thought lingered in the back of his mind. What if this is exactly what they wanted? Back in their holding cell, Ethan and Daniel sat side by side. Daniel finally broke the silence. "They believe it all." Ethan nodded slowly. "Good. The deeper they believe, the less they'll look for what's real." Daniel's eyes gleamed. "And the judge?" "He thinks he's in control," Ethan replied. "But he's already part of the plan." The brothers exchanged a knowing look. While the world believed they were trapped by a mountain of evidence, the truth was far more complicated. The stacked case wasn't crushing them. It was building the perfect cover. The fourth day of the trial arrived with an air of finality. Reporters had already gathered outside the courthouse before sunrise, their cameras waiting to capture the moment the judge would deliver his decision. Crowds formed on the courthouse. Steps. People holding signs, some declaring the twins guilty, others insisting on their innocence. The case had grown into more than a trial. It had become a public spectacle. Inside, the courtroom was packed to the last bench. The jury filed in slowly, their expressions tense and guarded. Each one carried the weight of long nights spent reviewing documents, listening to testimonies, and replaying the prosecutor's words in their heads. They knew what was expected of them. Ethan and Daniel entered with the same calm composure as before. Their steps were steady, their faces unreadable. Ethan straightened his suit jacket as he sat, while Daniel quietly folded his hands on the table. Their silence felt louder than ever, filling the room with an unshakable tension. Mr. Walters, their lawyer, looked exhausted. He had argued as best as he could, but the mountain of evidence against them had been too heavy to move. He sat between them, whispering nervously. "This is it," he said. "If you have anything to say, anything at all, now is the time." Ethan glanced at him but gave no answer. Daniel simply shook his head. Walters slumped back, frustrated. Why won't they fight for themselves, he thought. Why do they just sit there like they've already accepted this? Judge Harrison entered and took his place. His gavel struck the desk. Court is in session. His voice carried the weight of finality. The room fell silent. "Members of the jury," Harrison said, "have you reached a verdict?" The foreman, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, rose slowly. He held a folded piece of paper in his hand. The tension in the room thickened as he cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling slightly. He handed the paper to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Harrison. The judge unfolded it, his sharp eyes scanning the words. For a brief second, he paused, his lips pressed tightly together. Then he read aloud. "We, the jury, Find the defendants, Ethan Cole and Daniel Cole, guilty on all charges. The words echoed through the courtroom like a thunderclap. Gasps and murmurs exploded in the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously, cameras clicked, and whispers rose to a low roar. Some people nodded with satisfaction. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Mr. Walters closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping. His worst fear had come true. Ethan and Daniel, however, did not move. Their faces remained calm, as if they had already known this moment would come. Ethan exchanged a quick glance with Daniel, a look of quiet understanding. Judge Harrison raised his gavel again, silencing the room. His voice grew firm. "Order in the court. The defendants will rise." The twins stood slowly, their posture straight and steady. "Ethan Cole and Daniel Cole," Harrison began, his tone grave. "You have been found guilty on all counts. The crimes you have been convicted of are serious. Crimes that show deliberate planning, deception, and disregard for the law. For this, you leave this court no choice." He paused, his eyes narrowing. He wanted to see some sign of regret in their faces, some flicker of fear. But there was nothing. Their stillness unsettled him. "Therefore," he continued, "it is the judgment of this court that you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck down with finality. The gallery erupted again. Some gasped, others clapped, while a few shook their heads in dismay. Reporters rushed out to deliver breaking news headlines. "Twins sentenced to life," blared across screens and newspapers within minutes. Inside the courtroom, Walters buried, his face in his hands. "Life," he whispered, almost to himself. "Life in prison. You'll never get out." He turned desperately toward them. "Say something, please. Tell me you want to appeal. Tell me this isn't the end." Ethan's calm voice cut through the noise. "It isn't the end." Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "It's only the beginning." Walters stared at them, stunned. He didn't understand. But before he could ask anything more, bailiffs moved forward. "Defendants will be escorted from the courtroom," one announced. The twins placed their hands behind their backs without protest, allowing the cuffs to click into place. Their movements were smooth, almost practiced. As they were led away, they walked with steady steps, their heads held high. Judge Harrison remained on the bench watching them. He should have felt satisfaction. He had delivered justice, had upheld the law with firmness and clarity, and yet, deep inside, an unease gnawed at him. Why weren't they broken? Why weren't they even surprised? Their calmness felt wrong, as though life in prison had been part of their plan all along. That night, Harrison sat alone in his study. The room was quiet, filled only with the ticking of a clock. He replayed the verdict in his mind, remembering the way Ethan had looked at him, the quiet exchange between the brothers, the small smile Daniel allowed himself. The judge leaned back in his chair, frowning. "What are you hiding?" he muttered, to the empty room. He wanted to believe the case was over, that justice had been done, but a voice deep inside whispered otherwise. "This isn't finished, not by a long shot." In the transport van, Ethan and Daniel sat side by side as the vehicle carried them toward the prison. The world outside flashed by in blurred lights. Daniel broke the silence first. "It worked. They believe everything." Ethan nodded. "Good. The deeper the lie, the stronger our cover." Daniel leaned his head back against the wall. "And the judge?" Ethan's eyes glimmered in the dim light. "He thinks he won, but he just gave us exactly what we needed." The two shared a quiet look, one filled with certainty. While the world thought they had lost everything, the truth was very different. Their mission had just begun. The prison gates closed behind Ethan and Daniel with a soft, final click. The sound echoed like a distant drum, reminding everyone inside that rules now ruled their lives. The twins stepped into the reception hall, their movements calm and measured. Guards led them through long hallways painted in dull shades of gray and beige, while other inmates stared curiously from the corners of their cells. Ethan scanned the room with careful eyes, noticing details most people would miss. A guard adjusting his keys, a camera that didn't rotate fully, the placement of doors and windows, every detail mattered. Daniel followed, quietly observing patterns. Which prisoners got their meals first, which ones talked to guards freely, and how information passed from cell to cell. To anyone watching, they were just another pair of lifers. But in truth, they were far from ordinary. Their first cell was small, with 2 narrow beds and a single barred window. The walls were bare, but they made it work. As the door shut behind them, Ethan quietly whispered, "Observe everything. Learn everything. This is our world now." Daniel nodded, unpacking the few items they were allowed: clothes, hygiene products, and a small notebook hidden in the lining of his bag. "They think this is punishment," he said softly. "But we know it's opportunity." The twins quickly learned the rhythms of prison life. Morning roll call, breakfast, work assignments, and evening counts became predictable. Even the smallest patterns mattered: which guard walked certain halls, which inmates acted as messengers, and how rumors spread. Every detail added to the picture they were building. Other inmates began to notice them too. Some whispered, "Who are those calm guys? They don't seem scared of anything." Others watched quietly, unsure whether to approach or avoid them. The twins never started fights. They never demanded respect. They simply observed, learning the prison's hidden rules and hierarchies. By the end of the first week, Ethan and Daniel had mapped the cell blocks in their minds. They knew who held influence among the inmates, which guards were strict, and which rules could be bent. To the outside world, it seemed like simple adaptation. To them, it was preparation. One evening, as the last light faded through the bars, a fellow inmate approached their cell. He was tall and lean, with a watchful expression that hinted at years of experience navigating prison life. "You two don't belong here," he said quietly. "I've seen your kind. You're calm when you shouldn't be. You notice things others miss. That either means trouble or opportunity." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Opportunity?" The man nodded. "This place has secrets. Deals, trades, messages. If you know how to watch and listen, you can move like a ghost. You can know things no one else knows." Ethan exchanged a glance with Daniel. The man had unknowingly confirmed what they already knew. "Then we'll watch," Ethan said simply, "and learn." The inmate smiled faintly. "Good. Keep your heads down but your eyes open. That's all the advice you'll need." Then he walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. The days passed. Ethan and Daniel continued to observe, quietly noting every interaction, every conversation, every subtle rule that governed life behind bars. They spoke minimally, always listening more than they spoke. Guards and inmates alike assumed they were obedient, quiet prisoners. But the twins were building a network in their minds, a mental map of the prison's social and logistical pathways. Daniel leaned against the wall one night, looking at Ethan. "Do you think they suspect us?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet. They think we're ordinary. That's the advantage we have. Every misstep by others only strengthens our cover." Daniel smiled faintly. "I like being underestimated." Ethan nodded. The world always underestimates what it doesn't understand. Soon, they discovered subtle opportunities. A guard who occasionally turned a blind eye to small favors. An inmate who carried messages between blocks. Even a supply closet with overlooked items that could help in gathering information. Everything was a piece of the puzzle. Ethan wrote notes in his hidden notebook, recording patterns, routines, and observations. Daniel memorized details, sharing findings with Ethan in whispers when privacy allowed. Their planning was careful, never drawing attention. Weeks turned into months. The twins became known for their quiet demeanor and uncanny awareness. Guards respected them for their obedience. Inmates respected them for their patience and careful observation. Rumors began to spread. Those twins know everything before it happens, and in truth, they almost did. Every rumor, every movement, every decision they had to make was calculated. They were not simply surviving in prison. They were building a foundation for something larger, something no one else could see. One evening, as the prison lights dimmed and the hallways grew quiet, Ethan and Daniel sat side by side on their narrow beds. "We have everything we need," Ethan whispered. Daniel nodded, eyes gleaming in the dim light. "All the pieces are falling into place. The world thinks we lost, but we haven't. Not even close." Ethan looked toward the window where faint moonlight filtered through the bars. "Patience," he said. "This is only the beginning. Soon the right moment will come, and everything will move exactly as it should." Daniel smiled. "And the judge? He still believes he has us trapped." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "Let him think that. It makes his confidence easier to manipulate, and confidence is always the first mistake." In the quiet of the cell, surrounded by walls and rules, the twins were not prisoners. They were observers, planners, strategists. The sentence that had been meant to punish them had only strengthened their purpose, and as the night deepened, they both knew the truth. The prison was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of the most important chapter. Months passed inside the prison, but Ethan and Daniel never stopped observing. Every movement, every conversation, every rule had been studied, recorded, and remembered. What appeared to others as patience and calm was actually preparation. They had a plan, and everything they had endured had led them to this point. One evening, during the dim glow of the prison lights, Ethan leaned back against the wall of their cell and whispered, "It's time." "Headquarters sent word." Daniel's eyes widened slightly. "Finally?" Ethan nodded. "Finally. All the pieces are in place, the trial, the verdict, the prison. It was never about punishment. It was about access. Now we can move." Daniel allowed a small smile to appear for the first time in months. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it carried years of determination and focus. "And the judge? He still thinks we lost." Ethan's lips curved slightly. "He does, and that makes everything easier. People who believe they are in control make the worst mistakes. That's why he hasn't seen anything yet." Earlier that day, a subtle message had arrived. Not through official channels. The prison did not allow direct communication with outside authorities, but through a trusted inmate, one who acted as a messenger between blocks. Ethan had memorized the pattern. When the guard near the East Hall adjusted his keys at exactly 7:30 p.m., the inmate would place a folded paper on the floor near the recycling bin. Ethan retrieved it without anyone noticing and unfolded the paper quietly. It was a coded message, brief but clear. "Operation ready. Proceed carefully. Target accessible. Stay unnoticed." Daniel read it over Ethan's shoulder. "It's real," he said softly. "They're counting on us." Ethan nodded. "And we will not fail. Not now, not ever." That night, as the prison settled into silence, the twins began putting their plan into motion. They reviewed every observation they had made in the past months: guards' routines, the movement of inmates, and the hidden channels for passing information. Everything had been recorded, committed to memory, and now it was time to act. They whispered to each other, discussing small, deliberate moves that would not draw attention. Every action was subtle, calculated, and designed to gather intelligence without alerting anyone to their true purpose. Even the guards, who thought they were ordinary prisoners, did not notice the twins' quiet strategy. Every misstep by others, a distracted guard, a conversation overheard, a package misplaced, only strengthened their cover. In the early hours of the morning, Ethan and Daniel gathered in a corner of their cell. Ethan pulled out his hidden notebook, flipping to pages filled with codes, schedules, and notes on influential inmates. Daniel followed, memorizing key information that could not be written down. Ethan whispered, "Everything we learned in the trial in the prison, it all connects. The criminals outside, the leaders, the people who think they are untouchable, they're all vulnerable now, and we have the map." Daniel nodded. "The judge thought he locked us away, but he didn't. He gave us the perfect disguise." Ethan smiled faintly. "And headquarters believes in us. They trust us completely. That's why our silence worked. That's why we survived." By mid-morning, the twins began moving carefully through the prison, observing interactions, listening for information, and noting patterns that might reveal key players. They avoided drawing attention, appearing like ordinary prisoners, while quietly assembling critical intelligence. Every interaction they had was measured. When an inmate approached with gossip, they listened but gave nothing away. When guards checked on them, they acted compliant but attentive. Everything was a balance of blending in while gathering essential knowledge. It was exhausting, but they were patient. They had to be. Months of preparation had taught them that timing was everything. Later, during a meal in the common area, Ethan leaned slightly toward Daniel, speaking softly. "We've built everything we need. The network, the patterns, the connections. They believe this prison holds us, but it only holds our cover. The operation is about to move forward." Daniel's eyes sparkled. "And the moment comes when we turn everything into action?" Ethan nodded. "Exactly. Headquarters will guide the final steps, but we will execute it perfectly. We know this place better than anyone else now." By the evening, a subtle excitement ran through the twins. They were no longer ordinary prisoners. Every look, every gesture, every careful observation had prepared them for this moment. They had been undercover not just in the field, but in plain sight, inside a system that thought it had trapped them. Daniel finally spoke aloud, breaking the long silence between them. "The world thinks we lost. The judge thinks he won. But he hasn't even seen the beginning." Ethan's voice was calm, firm, and confident. "It's time. The real trial starts now. And this time, the outcome will be different." The two sat quietly, their minds sharp, ready, and aligned. While the outside world still whispered about their guilt, they were preparing to change everything. Their cover had succeeded beyond expectation. Their mission had been validated by months of silence, patience, and observation. And as they lay back on their narrow prison beds, the realization settled quietly between them. The sentence, the trial, the prison, all of it had been part of the plan. The revelation was complete. They were not prisoners at all. They were agents, ready to move, ready to strike with knowledge no one else possessed. And for the first time in months, both twins allowed themselves a small, confident smile. The world thought it had locked them away, but the truth was far more powerful. Ethan and Daniel were in control. The morning sun barely pierced the thick concrete walls of the prison, but Ethan and Daniel were already awake. Months of observation, analysis, and silent planning had led to this day. Everything they had endured, the trial, the verdict, the prison, had been carefully orchestrated to give them access and cover. Now, the final stage of their operation was about to unfold. Daniel leaned against the wall, glancing at Ethan. "It's time." Ethan nodded, his dark eyes scanning the cell block. "We have everything. Patterns, routines, connections. The world believes we're trapped, but that is exactly what makes it perfect." The twins moved through the prison corridors with quiet precision. Every step was deliberate, every glance measured. Guards nodded at them out of habit, unaware that these ordinary-seeming prisoners were orchestrating something far greater than anyone could imagine. In the common area, a small network of trusted inmates had already begun passing messages quietly. Ethan and Daniel had spent months identifying those who could be trusted, who were observant but discreet. Each conversation, each movement, each subtle exchange was part of a carefully crafted plan. By mid-morning, the twins were ready to transmit their first coded updates to headquarters. They used the small hidden channels they had discovered: a folded piece of paper placed in a recycling bin at a precise time, a pattern of knocks on the cell walls, and subtle signals during routine prison activities. Daniel glanced around the room, ensuring no one was paying attention. Everything looks clear. Ethan slid a folded message into a hollowed-out book in the prison library, the designated drop for headquarters. "Now we wait," he said. Later, a quiet acknowledgement arrived. The message confirmed that the intelligence they had gathered from routines, conversations, and observations matched data from outside the prison. They had identified key players in a criminal network operating across the city, people who thought the twins were locked away forever. Daniel's eyes gleamed. "They're ready. We've done everything perfectly." Ethan allowed a faint smile. "Yes, and the judge? He still has no idea." For Judge Harrison, the morning news was routine at first. The twins were still incarcerated, serving life sentences for their crimes. Reports of their calm behavior circulated, but nothing seemed unusual. He believed his verdict had ensured justice. What he did not know was that his ruling, his careful execution of the law, had been manipulated perfectly into the twins' plan. By condemning them, he had unwittingly granted them the cover they needed to operate inside the prison and beyond. As the day progressed, Ethan and Daniel began subtly coordinating their next steps. They shared information with headquarters through coded methods while maintaining their appearances as compliant prisoners. Every act, every nod, every word spoken in public had been planned to preserve their cover. Inmates around them continued their routines, guards followed schedules, and the prison hummed with ordinary activity. And yet, beneath the surface, a sophisticated operation was unfolding, one that no one inside the walls could see. By late afternoon, the twins had collected enough intelligence to outline the network of criminal leaders they needed to monitor. Every detail they had observed in months of silent surveillance now came together. The judge, the guards, even the inmates, all believed the twins were powerless. That belief made them invisible, and in operations like theirs, invisibility was a form of power. Ethan whispered to Daniel, "Everything is in place. Headquarters can act now. Using the information we've collected, our mission is complete." Daniel nodded, his gaze steady. "And our cover. Do we continue?" Ethan's expression remained calm, confident. "For now. They must never suspect us until the operation is fully executed. The moment they believe they know the truth, everything is at risk." Meanwhile, Judge Harrison reviewed notes on the case once more, confident that justice had been served. The twins were behind bars, their lives seemingly ended by the sentence he had delivered, yet a nagging unease lingered. He could not pinpoint it, only the strange feeling that something about the twins' calmness had always been deliberate. He dismissed it. "They are prisoners," he told himself. "That is all." And yet, the seed of doubt had been planted. By evening, the twins had completed their internal checks and updated headquarters with the final data. The outside world remained unaware of the intelligence gathered inside the prison walls. Ethan and Daniel returned to their cell, sitting quietly as the prison lights dimmed. Daniel finally spoke, breaking the silence. "It feels strange. Months of pretending, observing, waiting, and now it's done. Ethan leaned back, his calm confidence unwavering. This was never about surviving the sentence. This was about making every moment count. Now the operation moves forward. Our mission succeeds because no one saw it coming. Daniel smiled faintly. They believed they had won, but we controlled everything from the start. The final revelation was about to reach the world. Headquarters had verified all the intelligence collected by the twins. Criminal networks that had believed the twins were eliminated or imprisoned were now vulnerable. Plans were in motion to dismantle the networks efficiently, thanks entirely to the twins' careful observation, patience, and silent work inside the prison. Ethan and Daniel allowed themselves a small, shared moment of satisfaction. They had turned their sentence into an advantage. The prison had been a shield, a training ground, and a vantage point. Even Judge Harrison would eventually learn the truth. But not yet. For now, he remained confident, believing that justice had been served. Little did he know, he had played a crucial role in enabling the twins' success. As the night fell, Ethan and Daniel lay on their narrow beds side by side. They were not ordinary prisoners. They were strategists, observers, and agents who had turned a life sentence into the ultimate advantage, Ethan whispered. The world believes we are trapped, but in reality, we control what they cannot see. Daniel's eyes gleamed with quiet determination. And the best part? Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. The truth will hit them when they least expect it. In that moment, the two twins understood that their silence, their patience, and their cunning had not only protected them, but also allowed them to achieve something far greater than freedom alone. They had completed their mission, secretly, invisibly, and perfectly. And as the prison settled into quiet darkness, the world outside remained unaware that two seemingly condemned men had, all along, been in control.